We'll be revisiting the venerable Horsepen Bayou today. We have touched on this route before, but I wanted to go a bit more in-depth on this fantastic local route, as well as post some updated videos now that the blooming nature is on greater display. We'll begin from Bay Area Park, located at 7,500 Bay Area Boulevard. This destination hosts just about every amenity you'd expect, including restrooms, playgrounds, a fishing pier, a dog park, ample picnic areas, and 2 separate launch options. Winds are moderate today, from 11 to 18, and the heat index is what you would expect from a stifling summer day on the Gulf Coast. Here's an overview of our route, which will begin with a southward jog and continue on a southwesterly course most of the way, leading through various backwater and residential aesthetics. The initial leg will see the rest of Bay Area Park to port, then lead past the Horsepen Bayou Nature Center boathouse, which we'll check out in more detail on our return. There is a small island not far from the park's southern boundary that sometimes hosts a small alligator, but not today. Past the boathouse, you'll then arrive at the northernmost point of Lake Mark Kramer. Incidentally, if you're not familiar with that name and are passionate about Gulf Coast nature, he's well worth looking into and can be credited with many of the paddling and interpretive nature opportunities we have today. This section will also be marked by the unmistakable remnants of a hardwood tree trunk lurching uniquely out of the water. It is also within a short radius of this stump that I had my craziest alligator encounter, which you can learn about in another video. Instead of bearing on to Lake Mark Kramer toward Clear Lake, we'll bear slightly right and continue to follow the bayou past the starboard marshland. We'll then be confronted by a fork in the waterway. Either direction will get you where you need to go, but my preference is to keep right with the contour of the bayou. There wasn't a great deal of data viewing today, just a few heads and one on a shaded bank due to the intense heat. But it's here along this section that you'll see the first of many gators that inhabit Horsepen when conditions are more comfortable. Keeping straight through this section will lead you farther in, where you'll be met by a small expanse that clings to the bayou as it jaunts left. We'll paddle this area, then return to the western course of the bayou. Here I saw my first gator, a small but non-timid fellow that kept a sharp eye on me. Soon after, I would see the second and only gator not largely submerged, sprawled on the starboard bank beneath a shaded arbor. They'll often splash into the water here, but this one just calmly watched me float past. This is, in my opinion, the most picturesque portion of the paddle. Though you'll hear the faint sound of passing vehicles on nearby Middlebrook Drive, this is the only subtle reminder that you're not in tranquil backwaters far removed from civilization, as all such clues are entirely hidden from sight by the dense bayou foliage. This section will curve to and fro several times before giving way to a more consistent westerly heading. There's a good bit more of nature's shroud to experience on this leg, but thereafter you'll pass beneath the Middlebrook Drive Bridge, where you'll do well to keep an eye out for fishing lines often cast from a clearing just prior to the overpass. On the other side of Middlebrook Drive, you'll have a short stretch of continued tree line before the bayou surroundings begin to open up and several industrial power lines glide overhead. Soon thereafter, you'll pass beneath the bridge of University Drive, which is the main thoroughfare through the University of Houston Clear Lake campus. It's not uncommon to encounter some deer and plenty of ducks and egrets in this approximate area. There's also a sidewalk to port that students often use to traverse the campus quadrants. You'll then come to another bridge at Bay Area Boulevard, which I would consider the official passage from the backwater ambiance to the more suburban portion of the waterway. Even so, don't get complacent, as it's common to encounter a few good-sized gators on these stretches in cooler weather. You'll immediately pass Clear Lake High School on the left, along with a flanking drainage ditch that snakes south from the bayou. When school is in session, you'll often hear the Clear Lake Marching Band putting in their paces. The stretches beyond bear quite a semblance to one another. Many nice residences back up to the bayou and offer a great view of some of the older upscale neighborhoods that were built to accommodate NASA personnel prior to the area's population boom. Several whistling ducks, along with a few geese and herons, kept me company along much of this stretch. Elephant ears accented by orange canna lilies border a significant portion of these more open reaches. We'll then arrive at yet another bridge where El Dorado Boulevard spans the bayou. It's here that we'll elect to turn back today, given the oppressive heat. However, in the past I've taken this stretch as far as is passable. Keeping to the course would lead through the upscale Bay Oaks neighborhood and adjacent golf course, under FM 2351 and Space Center Boulevard, where it concludes behind a shopping center that locals will remember as the Old Randall's Grocery Store. From that point, the bayou spiders into several much smaller and impassable drainage avenues. Trekking this full course will provide just over a 12-mile paddle, if memory serves, but for today, we'll swing around beneath the El Dorado overpass and begin retracing our paddle strokes back to Bay Area Park. Everything will be essentially a mirror image of our earlier route until we arrive at a section near the beginning of the initial primitive stretch. Here we'll bear right, which will bypass a short portion of our previous paddle. If you'll recall, I mentioned a fork in the bayou earlier on. This narrow section will carry us down that separate fork that we initially bypassed. This one may not be advisable when water levels are low. For one, it can get very shallow very quickly. Second, when the water is that narrow and that shallow, gators have fewer egress routes than normal. Along this stretch, I've seen plenty of wildlife, including hogs and raccoons. This course will eventually lead us back out to the intersection of Lake Mark Kramer. From here, we won't deviate much from our initial route, but we will hug the right side of the waterway to get a closer look at the Horsepen Bayou Nature Center boathouse and a couple of carve-outs for Nature Center hikers to admire the bayou. We'll keep close to the starboard bank, which will lead us back along the pristine boardwalk of Bay Area Park. Just a quarter-mile or so beyond, we'll slide back into the launch, concluding an almost 9-mile paddle. What are my final observations on the Horsepen Bayou route? It's one of my local favorites. You won't find much more pristine bayou ambiance and aesthetic without heading a considerable distance out toward Anahuac and beyond. The fact that I can traverse such a rich and diverse route only minutes from home is something I hope I never take for granted. The only caveats I would be sure to mention deal with conditions, as highly gusty days can be quite unpleasant on the initial stretch up to and around Lake Mark Kramer. Beyond that, it's a fairly basic route that will accommodate most paddlers, provided they don't have gator paralysis. On that topic, in the cooler months, Horsepen will give the adjacent Horsepen Bayou a good run for its money for gator viewing. To say that they're everywhere on this one might be an overstatement, but not by much. Incidentally, I've done a comprehensive video on the gators of Horsepen Bayou that has been useful to many paddlers, especially those grappling with the understandable anxieties that come with sharing the water with gators for the first time. I hope to do the same for Horsepen soon. You can't do much better for wildlife viewing, in my opinion. There's nearly always an ample amount of various waterfowl, with one highlight being the sighting of a non-native mandarin duck on a couple of occasions. The nature lovers among us will find the first portion of this trek very compelling, and those a bit more metropolis-oriented will likely enjoy the residential stretches. It's one I highly recommend giving a try.